Support WrestleTalk!
Give us a subscribe.
On this past week's Raw, WWE made the genuinely baffling decision to break up the Hurt Business, arguably the coolest faction the company has created in the last 5 years, and one of the highlights of the pandemic-era WWE programming. The fan reaction was overwhelmingly negative, and it appears those involved thought so too, as Shelton Benjamin has taken to Twitter to reveal his frustration at the decision. The events of this past week have been beyond infuriating, frustrating, and disappointing, but sadly comes as no surprise. You have to feel for Benjamin, who, alongside Cedric Alexander, had really started to become a relevant part of WWE TV for the first time in years. But as he says himself, given everything we've seen WWE do recently, it comes as no surprise whatsoever. According to a report from Fightful Select, Vince McMahon alone made the decision to split up the Hurt Business, but even after a meeting with Bobby Lashley and MVP, who implored him to change his mind, Vince dug his heels in even more. They weren't alone in being upset by the decision though, as the report also states that McMahon's insistence on the breakup was a blow to morale. It's just what you want before WrestleMania. And speaking of the chairman, we now know how he reacted to the news that Chris Jericho would be making a return to WWE TV as a guest on Steve Austin's Broken Skull sessions. According to Austin, Vince was fine with the idea, which is possibly even more confusing than the decision to break up the Hurt Business. Speaking to Sports Illustrated, Austin said, "I texted Vince and said we had this badass idea about Jericho coming on the show. Vince goes, it's cool, go ahead. But me and Vince don't always do well with phones and texts and all that, so I texted one more time. Are you sure it's okay to have Chris Jericho on the show?" Vince gave me the thumbs up, and Chris came out to do the show. You have to wonder how censored or not the interview is going to be, and whether Chris will be allowed to mention his work in New Japan or AEW, or really say anything negative about WWE at all. And finally, for the news today, recently released WWE star Andrade has hinted that he may well have signed with a new company. He tweeted a picture of himself signing what is admittedly a blank piece of paper, but it included the caption "New Beginnings," so there's definitely a suggestion that he's made his next career move. And now it's time for a review of last night's episode of SmackDown in about 5 minutes. Thank you for being awesome pledge hammers on Patreon, Wonderwall, Brian Gallagher, and Ryan Disco Stewart. It's the go home to the go home show for WrestleMania, though this was really more of the go-home show, as next week's SmackDown was officially announced as WrestleMania SmackDown, where they'll host a fatal four-way for the SmackDown Tag Team Championships and the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, featuring wrestlers such as Slapjack, Jackson Ryker, Elias, Shinsuke Nakamura, and Jey Uso? Main event, Jey Uso, Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. That sucks for Jey. But it's okay, because Jey was hyped up to be part of the main event on this SmackDown, facing Daniel Bryan in a street fight? Well, that came out of nowhere. But the show itself kicked off with one of Bryan's opponents at WrestleMania, Edge, who cut a pretty wonderful promo outlining all his anger with Daniel Bryan and why it should have been a one-on-one match with Roman Reigns instead. While I've praised Edge's portrayal of this character in the past, I've criticized the character's motivation, because really, he was angry at the wrong things. This promo, though, was where finally everything clicked for me. Edge said that he'd been fighting back for 10 years to get this, and Bryan has weaseled his way into the match and taken away his spotlight. This is his moment, and Bryan has taken that away from him, and he's made it much harder for Edge to win, mathematically. It should have been a one-on-one match. And that's a great character. This was an excellent opening promo, and I think the most interesting thing is that Edge is clearly a bit obsessed with all of this, but his motivation is totally understandable, and you genuinely might side with him over Daniel Bryan. And I love that. In a backstage segment afterwards, Edge mentioned that if Bryan gets taken out of WrestleMania, thanks to Jey Uso in the street fight later tonight, he won't feel bad at all. Afterwards, the Alpha Academy cut a promo in the ring saying that next week they'll become the new SmackDown Tag Team Champions, and honestly, I believe them. They had another 8-man tag alongside the Dirty Dogs versus the Mysterios and the Street Profits, which started off fun and got more fun as it went on. In another nice little finishing sequence, Alpha Academy put away Montez Ford with the Chaos Theory German suplex into the splash from Otis, which they really seem to be trying to get over, and it's working. I think the most focus has been placed onto Alpha Academy heading into the Fatal 4-Way, which either means they're going to win the titles, or the Mysterios are going to win, and Alpha Academy will be their first challengers. I personally hope that Alpha Academy win the belts. Paul Heyman backstage informed Sonya Deville and Adam Pearce that there had been a legal stipulation added to the street fight in the main event, and that Jey Uso will not be held accountable for any damages done to Daniel Bryan. Isn't that what they do in every match? Especially street fights, right? When's the last time someone got penalized for injuring someone? Seth Rollins and Cesaro had an in-ring promo segment next where Corey Graves interviewed them both. I'm really into this feud, and I'm very excited for their match at Mania. However, I dislike that this entire feud has now just become about swinging, and that's about it. I would have hoped it would have been more about Cesaro's struggle to break through into the main event, with Rollins being the gatekeeper, which there have been hints of, but now it's just more of a case of, you swung me, and I don't like that. It's fine, I just feel like there's something more there if they wanted to use it. Cesaro did have a good line here though, telling Rollins to take a swing at him, but Rollins didn't, and walked away instead. And then came a baffling few minutes of television. So for this segment, I'm just gonna say what factually happened, with no emotional investment, and you tell me whether you think it was good or bad. Backstage, Nia Jax, Shayna Baszler, and Reginald run into Carmella. Nia Jax tells her that she didn't treat her man very well before walking off. After an ad break, it was Natalya versus Shayna Baszler. Nia Jax was on commentary. I timed the match, it lasted 33 seconds. Natalya won with a roll-up. Nia Jax and Shayna then beat up both Natalya and Tamina, while Carmella watched on from backstage. Ruby Riott and Liv Morgan then come out and get beaten up by Nia and Shayna. Mandy Rose and Dana Brooke then come out and they stand tall briefly. Lana and Naomi also come out and they get beaten up by Natalya and Tamina, who've recovered at this point. Meanwhile, backstage, Carmella accepts the resume from Billie Kay. So, objectively, do you think that it was good or a bad? Of course it was a bad segment. 33 seconds for a match? Really? The thing is, you could make the argument that it's a similar kind of story to the SmackDown men's tag division, in that you have a few teams that are all vying for the #1 contendership spot and the titles. But the difference is, though, the reason that one works is because they get over based on the in-ring quality of their matches that they've been having, highlighting each of the team's differences, their styles of wrestling, and how they contrast to each other. 33 seconds isn't enough to do that. Honestly, tell me now, what is the difference between Lana and Naomi, and Dana Brooke and Mandy Rose, and the Riot Squad, and Natalya and Tamina? They are all the same. They have their own looks, sure, but we know nothing about what separates them as a team. There's nothing to actually make them distinct characters. They're all just there, and that's why this story doesn't work. Also, what's Carmella doing? I don't know. After that came Sami Zayn's red carpet trailer premiere featuring Logan Paul. Logan says he'll be at WrestleMania after Sami invites him, and Sami plays the trailer for his documentary, which is genuinely really funny. There's some great jokes peppered into it, and Sami is a great actor. Afterwards though, Logan revealed that Kevin Owens came to him in the locker room and told him there was no conspiracy and that he didn't seem very sold on the documentary. But before Sami could properly retort, Owens came out and hit a stunner on Zayn before pushing Logan aside as he exited the ring. I've made it quite clear in the past that I am no Logan Paul fan. However, he was fairly inoffensive here, and I hope he gets a stunner from Owens at Mania. That actually might be quite fun. Sami got his revenge backstage on Owens, attacking him before running away. Carmella's back again next, this time facing Bianca Belair in a fun little match. Bianca comes out on top, getting fired up after Carmella tried to tie her hair to the bottom rope. Banks comes out for a confrontation afterwards, and the two just kinda stand there and point at the Mania sign. Alright. Historic, WrestleMania. At least there's no Reginald. After that, King Corbin cut a promo saying he's going to beat Drew McIntyre next week on Raw. You won't, but nice try. After that, Apollo Crews said that he and Big E will fight in a Nigerian drum match at WrestleMania. Okay, it's a street fight, right? And the third promo in a row, it's Edge and Paul Heyman, with Heyman trying to essentially turn Edge against Bryan even more than he already is. And the main event match of Bryan vs. Uso was really fun. Edge on commentary kept bad-mouthing both Bryan and Jay, and kept talking to them anytime they got near, and really got over his character some more. Bryan won by smashing Jey Uso with a chain before tapping him out in the yes lock. And then Bryan decided to kill everyone, hitting a running knee on Edge and smashing his face off the ring post, and then dodging a thrown chair by Reigns and hitting a knee on him and locking in the yes lock until officials broke it up. Very strong booking of Bryan, and I think it was really good. I just wish Jey Uso got some wins at some point. Not against Edge or Bryan, but just against someone. So that was the show. Let me know what you thought of the show in the comments below, because I'll be replying to people from out of nowhere. I thought this was a decent episode, all things considered. There's not much left in the way of story progression for most of the feuds, but they ticked over nice enough ahead of the Go Home episode next week. I'm into most of them, and I'm looking forward to the matches at WrestleMania. I will say though, that none of the feuds really feel like they've had WrestleMania caliber builds, but the matches should still be good, right? This show gets a high smack bang in the middle, 3 out of 5. You can watch mine and Andy's podcast review of SmackDown on the WrestleTalk podcast channel by pressing the video on the right now, and press the video below that to find out more about some big WrestleMania plans for Alexa Bliss and The Fiend. Don't forget to subscribe here for daily wrestling news videos. I've been called Chopper. Jam that jam.